The writer's relationship with his wife has been complicated from the start. Even before they got married in September 2024, their relationship had its fair share of ups and downs, particularly when it came to trust and commitment. He was deeply in love with her and, despite not being officially together for a time, he still supported her financially. He paid for her car and other expenses because he believed in their relationship and wanted to take care of her. However, this generosity was not reciprocated with the same level of loyalty or appreciation. While they were not officially in a relationship at one point, she made him a promise that she wouldn't do anything behind his back. This promise, though simple in words, held a lot of emotional significance for him. It was a way for him to believe that they were still connected, that even if they weren't together at that moment, there was hope for them in the future. Unfortunately, she didn't uphold that promise. She made decisions that hurt him, and though they weren't technically together, the emotional pain he felt was real. One of the major incidents that impacted their relationship happened when he invited her on a fishing trip. He likely saw this as an opportunity to spend time together, reconnect, and strengthen their bond. However, during the trip, she asked if she could visit a friend, a man she had previously sent explicit images to. This request alone was hurtful because it signaled a lack of consideration for his feelings. When he expressed his discomfort and told her he would prefer she didn't go, she ignored his feelings and went anyway. This action showed a disregard for the relationship they were trying to rebuild and made him feel insignificant. Following this incident, she left for a week to be with her friends, taking with her a brand new fishing pole he had bought as a gift for her. This added to his sense of rejection. It wasn't just about her leaving, it was about how easily she seemed to disregard his efforts to make her happy. A week later, she returned, told him she loved him, and he forgave her. He took her back despite his pain because he wanted to believe in their relationship. At that point, he hadn't yet discovered the full extent of her betrayals. But only a few days after she came back, he found out that she had done more behind his back than he initially thought. Feeling deeply hurt and betrayed, he confronted her, and in his anger and pain, he told her to leave. However, she pleaded with him not to, saying that she loved him, and once again, he gave in and took her back. Despite these rocky experiences, they eventually got married in September 2024. The wedding might have felt like a fresh start, a way to put the past behind them and move forward together. In the beginning, things seemed to improve. She appeared to be truly bonded to him, and he hoped that marriage would solidify their commitment. But the underlying issues in their relationship never really went away. They continued to argue frequently, and though they were now husband and wife, the unresolved wounds from the past still affected their dynamic. One of the biggest struggles he faced was his inability to fully heal from what had happened before. He wanted to trust her again, but trust isn't something that can be restored with words alone, it requires actions, consistency, and genuine effort. When he expressed that she needed to prove she was trustworthy before he could fully open his heart again, she didn't seem to understand why. This disconnect made him feel even more distant from her. Their early marriage was marked by repeated conflicts, and the emotional strain took a toll on him. He wanted to move forward, but every time he tried, he found himself reminded of the past betrayals. His wife, on the other hand, seemed to expect that her apologies alone should be enough to fix everything. While forgiveness is an essential part of any relationship, trust requires rebuilding. She didn't seem to acknowledge the depth of the pain she had caused, and as a result, he felt alone in his struggles. Thus, from the very beginning of their marriage, there was an imbalance. He had given everything to her, his love, financial support, and forgiveness, while she had repeatedly acted in ways that hurt him. Despite his efforts to create a stable and loving relationship, the wounds from their past kept resurfacing. As they moved forward, this emotional baggage would only continue to weigh them down, making it harder for them to truly connect as husband and wife. Trust is the foundation of any strong relationship, and in the case of the writer and his wife, this foundation was already fragile even before they got married. Despite their official union in September 2024, the scars of past betrayals lingered, making it difficult for them to truly move forward. The writer's struggle with trust was not without reason. His wife had broken her promises multiple times, and even though he kept forgiving her, the damage was already done. One of the earliest betrayals that deeply hurt him was when she decided to visit another man while they were on a fishing trip together. This was not just any man, it was someone she had previously sent explicit images to. The mere fact that she had engaged in such behavior in the past was already painful for him, but the way she handled the situation during their trip made it even worse. He had invited her to spend time with him, likely hoping that it would bring them closer. When she asked if she could visit the other man, it showed that her priorities were elsewhere. Even when he expressed his discomfort and told her he would prefer that she didn't go, she ignored his feelings and went anyway. This act of disregard created a rift between them, but instead of taking responsibility for her actions, she left for a week to be with her friends. To make things worse, she took a brand new fishing pole he had gifted her, almost as if his efforts to make her happy meant nothing. Her absence during that week must have been excruciating for him. He had done so much for her, yet she had chosen to distance herself from him and spend time with others instead. When she finally returned, she told him she loved him, and despite everything, he took her back. At this point, he still didn't know the full extent of her betrayals. But just a few nights after she returned, he found out that she had done more behind his back than he had initially thought. When he confronted her about it, the emotions overwhelmed him, and in a moment of pain and anger, he told her to leave. However, she begged him not to, professing her love once again. Even though he was deeply hurt, he couldn't bring himself to let go, so he forgave her and took her back. This cycle of betrayal, confrontation, and forgiveness repeated itself multiple times, creating a pattern that would continue into their marriage. When they finally got married in September 2024, he likely hoped that it would mark a turning point in their relationship. Maybe he believed that marriage would bring them closer, that the commitment would make her more faithful, or that their love could finally heal the wounds of the past. In the beginning, things seemed promising. She appeared to be truly devoted to him, and for a while, their relationship seemed stable. However, the underlying issues were never resolved. They continued to argue frequently, and his inability to fully trust her became a major problem. It wasn't that he didn't want to trust her, he just needed her to prove that she was worthy of that trust. After everything that had happened, he needed reassurance, consistency, and transparency. But she didn't seem to understand why he felt this way. Instead of acknowledging the damage her past actions had caused, she expected him to simply move on and trust her again without any effort on her part. This disconnect made him feel even more distant from her. Every time they argued, the unresolved pain resurfaced. He wanted to move forward, but her lack of understanding made it difficult. Trust isn't something that can be restored overnight, and it certainly isn't something that can be demanded. It has to be earned. But instead of working to rebuild that trust, she seemed to expect that her apologies alone should be enough to fix everything. This imbalance in their relationship only made things worse. He had given so much to her, his love, financial support, forgiveness, and patience, but she had not reciprocated that effort. While he was struggling to heal from the past, she didn't seem to acknowledge how much pain she had caused him. This left him feeling isolated in his emotions, as if he was the only one trying to make things work. Over time, his frustration grew. He found himself becoming more emotionally distant and, at times, even emotionally mean, not because he wanted to hurt her, but because he was hurt himself. He had tried so hard to make the relationship work, yet he felt like she wasn't meeting him halfway. The pain of past betrayals, combined with her apparent lack of effort to rebuild trust, made him feel more alone than ever in their marriage. His growing distrust also led to another issue: control. Because he had been hurt so many times before, he felt the need to set boundaries to protect himself. He wasn't trying to be controlling in a manipulative way, rather, he was trying to shield himself from further heartbreak. But from her perspective, she may have seen his need for reassurance as unnecessary or even suffocating. This only added more tension to their relationship, as she didn't fully understand the depth of his pain. As the arguments continued and their emotional distance grew, it became clear that they were stuck in a cycle of mistrust and misunderstanding. He wanted to believe in her, but her actions in the past had left scars that couldn't simply be ignored. She, on the other hand, wanted him to trust her again without fully acknowledging the effort required to earn that trust back. This ongoing struggle would eventually push them further apart, setting the stage for even bigger conflicts down the road. As the marriage progressed, the cracks in their relationship grew wider, fueled by both financial and emotional struggles. Money itself wasn't the core issue, but it became a source of tension because of what it represented: effort, responsibility, and a sense of fairness in their relationship. The writer had always been financially supportive of his wife, even when they weren't officially together. He paid for her car, covered her expenses, and continued to take care of things because he loved her and wanted to build a future with her. However, over time, he began to feel as though he was the only one making sacrifices. Once they got a house together, his feelings of emotional and financial exhaustion only deepened. He noticed that his wife didn't seem particularly interested in being there for him. This wasn't just about money, he needed emotional support, reassurance, and a genuine effort from her to rebuild what had been broken. But instead, she seemed distant, and their arguments only increased. At this point, the writer acknowledges that he became emotionally mean. It's clear that he never intended to hurt her, but his frustrations built up over time. Every time they fought, it likely reminded him of the past betrayals and the way she had disregarded his feelings before. His emotional reactions weren't about controlling her for the sake of power, they were about protecting himself from getting hurt again. His wife had apologized for the past, but her actions didn't reflect a deep commitment to rebuilding trust. Apologies, while important, aren't enough on their own. They need to be followed by consistent effort and an understanding of the other person's pain. However, from the writer's perspective, it seemed like she expected her apologies to instantly fix everything, without any meaningful change in her behavior. This left him feeling unheard, unappreciated, and emotionally isolated. As financial stress and emotional distance grew, a new conflict arose: his wife's desire for a PTSD support dog. One day, he took her to an adoption center just to look at dogs, likely as a way to spend time together and have a light-hearted moment amidst their struggles. However, what started as a casual outing turned into another source of conflict. She insisted that she needed a support dog for her PTSD, but he pointed out two key concerns. They couldn't afford it. He was already paying for her car and covering most of their expenses while struggling to furnish their house with his small paycheck. Adding the cost of another pet, especially one that would require medical care, food, and other expenses, was simply not feasible. He wanted them to work on their relationship first. He wasn't dismissing her struggles with PTSD, but he believed that before they brought in another responsibility, they needed to address their own emotional stability as a couple. He suggested counseling so they could work on their mental and emotional health together. His reasoning was practical, but his wife didn't see it that way. She may have felt like he was dismissing her needs or trying to control her choices, when in reality, he was thinking about their long-term well-being. This disagreement added more fuel to their arguments, and the emotional distance between them only widened. Eventually, the tension reached a breaking point, and his wife had a breakdown. Feeling overwhelmed, she left and went back to her mother's house. This was a turning point in their relationship. It was no longer just about trust issues or financial struggles, it had escalated to the possibility of divorce. Her mother played a significant role in how things unfolded from there. According to the writer, his mother-in-law believed that he blamed his wife for everything. However, he insists that this wasn't the case, he just struggled to express himself in a way that didn't come off as accusatory. He acknowledges that his words may have been poorly chosen at times, but his frustrations were rooted in real concerns. At this point, his wife told him that she wanted a divorce. After everything they had been through, the betrayals, the fights, the repeated attempts at reconciliation, she was ready to walk away. For the writer, this must have been an incredibly painful moment. He had given so much to this relationship, not just financially but emotionally. He had fought to keep them together, forgiven her when she had broken his trust, and continued to believe in their love. And now, she was the one choosing to leave. But even after deciding to separate, she still expected him to support her financially. Since he didn't have a driver's license, he relied on her car to get to work. When she left, he was forced to take Ubers, which was expensive. Despite this, she and her mother insisted that he should continue paying for her car, arguing that as her husband, it was his responsibility to provide for her. This situation highlights a fundamental imbalance in their relationship. While she was ready to leave him and move on, she still wanted the financial security he provided. This likely made him feel used, like his worth in the relationship was reduced to how much he could financially contribute. He wasn't just losing his wife, he was being asked to continue supporting someone who no longer wanted to be with him. At this stage, his emotions must have been extremely conflicted. On one hand, he was angry and hurt. On the other hand, he still loved her and struggled to let go. Their marriage had been a constant battle between love and pain, forgiveness and betrayal, hope and disappointment. Even though things were falling apart, a part of him still wanted to believe that they could fix things. This period of separation would set the stage for an even bigger betrayal, one that would test his ability to keep forgiving and question whether their relationship was truly salvageable. After his wife left and went back to her mother's house, the writer found himself in an extremely difficult position, not just emotionally, but practically as well. Without a driver's license, he relied on her car to get to work, but since she had taken the car with her, he was forced to start using Ubers, which was expensive. Despite this, she and her mother insisted that he should still pay for her car payments, arguing that as her husband, it was his responsibility to provide for her. This expectation must have felt unfair and deeply frustrating. His wife had chosen to leave the marriage, had told him she wanted a divorce, and yet, she and her mother still expected him to financially support her as if they were still together. This reinforced the imbalance in their relationship. He had given so much to her emotionally and financially, but she had repeatedly failed to reciprocate in any meaningful way. As if this situation wasn't already painful enough, the next betrayal came quickly. While she was still mad at him, she ended up cuddling with another guy. This was yet another example of her disregard for his feelings and the promises she had made to him. What made it even worse was that when she was confronted about it later, she called him crying, saying she was vulnerable and drunk. This moment was particularly significant because it showed a pattern in their relationship. Whenever she made a mistake, she would turn to emotional appeals rather than taking responsibility. Instead of acknowledging that what she did was hurtful and wrong, she framed herself as the victim of her own emotions, using her vulnerability as a way to gain his sympathy. This put him in a difficult position. On one hand, he was deeply hurt and knew that what she had done was wrong. On the other hand, he still loved her and struggled to see her in pain. At this point, he began questioning everything. Was he overreacting? Was he being too controlling or unreasonable? Was he wrong for wanting to set boundaries in their relationship? These doubts were not born from a lack of clarity but from emotional manipulation. She had repeatedly hurt him, and yet, through her tears and apologies, she always found a way to make him feel guilty for being upset. What made this situation even more complicated was his faith. As a Christian, he had been raised to believe that marriage was sacred and that divorce was not something to take lightly. The Bible allows for divorce in cases of adultery and separation from God, but even though his wife had been unfaithful in multiple ways, he still found himself believing that they could rekindle their love and make things work. So, when she came back and wanted to reconcile, he took her back, again. This decision likely wasn't easy, and from an outside perspective, many people would say he was making a mistake. But for him, love wasn't something he could easily turn off. He had invested so much of himself into this relationship that the thought of letting go completely was painful. However, even after they got back together, the trust issues didn't go away. Given everything that had happened, he was now more cautious than ever. He wanted to set boundaries, not to control her, but to protect himself from getting hurt again. But when she told him that she wanted to hang out with a male friend, alarm bells went off in his mind. She assured him that this particular friend was different, that he was the only guy who had ever set boundaries and had never tried anything with her. But after everything she had done in the past, how was he supposed to believe that? Trust is built through consistent, trustworthy behavior, and so far, her actions had only proven that she could not be relied upon to respect their relationship. His concerns weren't irrational. In a healthy marriage, both partners should feel secure and respected. Given her history of broken promises, emotional manipulation, and outright betrayal, it was completely reasonable for him to feel uncomfortable with her spending time alone with another man. Yet, he was still questioning himself. Was he being controlling? Was he wrong for wanting to set boundaries? His self-doubt likely stemmed from years of emotional manipulation and a lack of a strong father figure in his life. Without a role model to guide him on what a healthy relationship should look like, he struggled to define what was acceptable behavior and what wasn't. He knew that he didn't want to be controlling, but at the same time, he didn't want to be naive. This internal conflict left him feeling lost. On one hand, he wanted to trust his wife, to believe that things could be different this time. On the other hand, experience had taught him otherwise. He had given her chance after chance, and each time, she had let him down. Now, he found himself at a crossroads. Should he continue giving her the benefit of the doubt, hoping that this time she would truly change? Or should he finally accept that some things, and some people, simply don't change? The struggle between love and self-respect was tearing him apart. He had spent so much time fighting for this marriage, but at what cost? And more importantly, was it even worth it anymore? At this point in the relationship, the writer is completely torn. After everything that has happened, the emotional distance, financial strain, betrayals, and manipulations, he is still holding on to hope that things can work out. He wonders if he is being unreasonable for wanting to set boundaries, and even questions whether checking his wife's phone would be wrong. His internal struggle reveals the extent of the emotional turmoil he has endured. His wife claims she still wants to stay married, but after all of her past actions, he doesn't know what to believe. She had betrayed his trust multiple times, yet each time she came back with apologies and emotional pleas, he found himself forgiving her. Now, even as his instincts tell him to be cautious, he is second-guessing himself, wondering if his need for reassurance is controlling or unfair. The conflict between love and self-respect. This final part of the story revolves around the writer's internal battle. He clearly loves his wife deeply, otherwise, he wouldn't have given her so many chances. However, love alone is not enough to sustain a healthy marriage. Trust, respect, and mutual effort are just as crucial, if not more. The issue is that, despite his willingness to forgive and try again, his wife has shown little effort in truly rebuilding the trust she broke. She wants to be in the marriage, but her actions don't align with her words. She continues to act in ways that trigger his insecurities, fails to acknowledge the depth of the pain she has caused, and expects him to simply move on from the past without real change. This is why he still feels distant, why he still struggles to heal, and why he continues to question her intentions. What makes matters worse is that every time he tries to establish healthy boundaries, he starts doubting himself. He worries that he is being controlling when, in reality, he is only trying to protect himself from more heartbreak. Boundaries are not about control, they are about self-respect and ensuring that both partners in a relationship feel safe and valued. Given his wife's history, his concerns about her spending time with another man are completely valid. Trust must be earned, and she has done little to rebuild it. The impact of his past. Another key element of his self-doubt comes from his upbringing. He admits that he didn't have a father figure growing up, which means he never had a model for what a strong, healthy man should be in a relationship. Because of this, he struggles with defining what is acceptable behavior and what isn't. He is stuck between wanting to be forgiving and kind, yet not wanting to be taken advantage of. Without a guiding example, he is left to figure it out on his own, and that uncertainty causes him to doubt his own instincts. This is why he keeps asking, am I wrong for setting these boundaries? Am I being controlling? Should I check her phone, or would that be too much? Am I just crazy for continuing to believe in this marriage? His self-doubt isn't a reflection of him being unreasonable, it's a result of years of emotional manipulation, past betrayals, and a lack of clear guidance on what a healthy relationship should look like. The question of trust. One of the most critical aspects of this story is trust. He wants to trust his wife again, but trust is not something that can be rebuilt through words alone. It requires consistent actions that show sincerity, honesty, and commitment. Checking her phone is a perfect example of his inner conflict. In a healthy relationship, partners should respect each other's privacy, and checking someone's phone without their consent would usually be considered a breach of trust. However, this situation is different. His wife has a history of lying and betrayal, and his suspicions aren't coming out of nowhere, they are based on past experiences. While checking her phone might give him temporary reassurance, it wouldn't fix the deeper issue, the fact that he doesn't feel secure in their relationship. Even if he found nothing suspicious on her phone, the doubt would still remain because she hasn't done enough to rebuild trust in the first place. The only real solution is for her to consistently prove through her actions that she is committed to their marriage and willing to be transparent. But so far, she hasn't done that. The future of their marriage. As things stand, the future of their marriage is uncertain. He is still paying for most things, still emotionally invested, and still hoping that they can return to the way things once were. But deep down, he knows that the relationship cannot survive unless real changes happen. The biggest questions he must ask himself now are: is she truly committed to change, or is she just saying what he wants to hear? Does she love him, or does she just love the security he provides? If he continues to forgive her, will she ever learn to respect him? At what point does his love for her become self-destruction? While his faith as a Christian teaches him to believe in love, commitment, and forgiveness, it also teaches that marriage should be built on mutual respect and honesty. At some point, he has to consider whether staying in this relationship is truly what God would want for him. Ultimately, the story is not just about his marriage, it is about his journey toward self-worth. He has spent so much time fighting for a relationship that he may have forgotten to fight for himself. The real question is not whether he is being controlling, but whether he is allowing himself to be controlled, by his wife's manipulation, by his own insecurities, and by the fear of letting go. Whatever decision he makes next will determine whether he continues this painful cycle or finally chooses to prioritize his own well-being.